Football is back.
Let's go, baby!
On July 26th and 27th, teams across the league take the field for Back Together Weekend, presented by YouTube TV.
Let's do this for the fans!
With 2 full days of practices, player interviews, and behind-the-scenes access, it's a can't-miss NFL reunion.
Woo!
Back Together Weekend, presented by YouTube TV, July 26th and 27th. Go to NFL.com/BackTogetherWeekend for more information.
You're listening to Later with Mo Kelly on demand from KFI AM 640.
Sam's a sex doc. He's a Sam's a sex doc. He's a Sam's a sex doctor. Sex doc, sex doc. He's a sex doc. Sam on later with Mo. Sam's a sex doctor. Sex doc, sex doc. He's a Sam's a sex doctor.
Yeah, the sex doctor Sam's is in right now. So listen up to KFI's Later with Mo Kelly. La 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 la, later with Mo. Later with Mo. La la la, later with Mo.
KFI AM 640. It's Later with Mo Kelly, live everywhere on social media and the iHeartRadio app. The sex doctor is in. Put the kids to bed. Let me put it that way. Sam, it's great to see you. I saw this article today and I immediately thought of you in the sense of I wanted to get your thoughts on this. And according to the 2023 Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Youth Risk Behavior Report, it found that adolescent sexual behavior has declined since 2013. If you were to just ask me, I'd assume that it would have increased because of all the methods and availabilities and options and people had and social media apps and the dating apps that they'd be more inclined to engage in sexual behavior. But according to this, 1 in 4 Gen Z adults has not had partnered sex, for example.
That was a little bit surprising to see just like that specific statistic. 25% of Gen Zers have not had partnered sex. Now, it kind of goes along the same lines, and I'll get to it in a little bit, the male loneliness epidemic. I've been hearing a lot about this on social media and stuff, and we'll get to that. But the report came out of the Kinsey Institute. It was a survey from 2022. 1 out of 4 Gen Zers have not had partnered sex. 16% of them said that they were more hesitant after Roe v. Wade was overturned. I thought that was
really,
yeah. I thought that was an interesting point to bring up, but it was also kind of like a negligible statistic to bring up just in general. Usually, people after they're done having sex and they have a kid, things tend to move on after that. Mm-hmm. But more and more people, from what I'm seeing, I didn't see this in the article, but I've seen this in other stories and other articles that have been posted on the subject. More and more young people are getting their emotional needs met through online social relationships, where a lot, in the past, a lot of youth were much more curious about sex and sexuality, and they would experiment with each other throughout high school or throughout college. Now, with the ubiquitous access to porn that a lot of people have, especially younger people, it may have taken the mystique and the sense of taboo out of sex. And so a lot of their questions are immediately being answered by porn, which is why it's so important to have adequate sexual education when it comes to contextualizing porn.
See, I'm thinking that would not only desensitize us or the generation, but it would make it. When I remember growing up, let me put it this way, sex was like, oh my gosh, it was this magical land that if you're lucky enough, one day you'll get to visit. Now it's like it's probably pretty passé because it's ever present. And so we hear the stories of children, be honest, engaging in sexual acts at a much younger age. But this study flies in the face of that.
Yeah. Well, because a lot of times especially when younger people are engaging in sexual activities, it's them exploring themselves and exploring, and themselves in the context of other people sexually. And now before, like, especially when we were growing up, like the most that we probably ever had access to was, scrambled porn on Playboy and like
magazines
our uncle's subscription that he hid in the bathroom, that kind of thing. Where nowadays it's everywhere. So a lot of these questions and a lot of the mystique behind it is just gone. And it makes it so kids are less likely to have those questions and try to experiment to find the answers to them. They see it and they're immediately like, okay, well, that makes sense. And they're immediately turned off of it.
We're talking about Gen Z, but I'm Gen X. I grew up in the age of I'll say the discovery of HIV and AIDS and how that severely muted our collective sexual behavior. Didn't stop it, because we were still having sex, but we were still bombarded with like, if you have sex, you're going to die type messaging. Yeah.
Well, I'm Gen X as well. And I remember the lessons that we learned in the late 80s and early 90s about protecting yourself. We had, 1991 at the end of it, we had Magic Johnson in November of 91. And then within a month, Freddie Mercury passed away from HIV.
Where was Rock Hudson in that? I can't remember.
He was in the 80s.
Late 80s?
Yeah, mid to late 80s. Okay. That's when Rock Hudson passed away. But really, the amount of exposure towards the dangers of sex really sprouted up around then. And that's when in that era is when you started to see TLC, Ain't Too Proud to Beg, making condoms a fashion statement, where they were very much making it so that people were being more mindful and careful about what they were doing sexually. Unfortunately, and you can say fortunately, but also unfortunately. The fortunate thing is medical advancements, especially after Magic Johnson's announcement, the amount of funding towards HIV/AIDS research skyrocketed. And after that, you start to see people different treatments coming out that were more effective, and it wasn't the death sentence that it was back in the 90s. People are living longer, healthier lives. Magic Johnson is still alive and kicking.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is that a lot of the lessons that we Gen Xers learned about sex and sexuality got lost on a lot of generations. So you're probably going to see more cases of, people not necessarily knowing what they're doing sexually as far as disease goes, but the mystique and the questions of actually, sex and sex, what it actually is, they're getting those questions answered by the internet now.
Okay. If I understand you correctly, whereas our generation, we dealt with the fear and the consequences of, Gen Z is not dissuaded by fear. They're just disinterested.
Yeah. Their emotional and physical needs are being met in other ways. They have online relationships with people. We were talking about AI. That's a burgeoning field right now where there's a lot more people getting into relationships with AI. But it's becoming something where sex is the gain, like the risk reward of it is slowly no longer balancing. More people or less people are looking to have families and have kids because their emotional needs are being met in other ways. And we were talking about how there's like a population slump here, and also especially in Japan. This thing isn't what we're talking about. Isn't something that's just impacting us here in the United States. It's almost a worldwide phenomenon right now.
When we say Gen Z, we're talking about people who were born between 1997 and 2012. 1997, those individuals obviously are around 28, but they are still within the sweet spot of the childbearing years. In other words, they have the lion's share responsibility of having and starting the families now at this point. And they seem, we know that Gen Z, they're less likely to drive. They're less likely to have sex. They're less likely to start a family. What drives them then?
Really, all of their needs are met at home. Guys are sitting at home playing video games, having
That's
online.
Not good.
No, they're having online conversations with people in their virtual worlds. They are getting their needs met through. If they're into porn, they can have their sexual needs met online. If they want to have more of like that verbal interaction with people, they can do it much more safely online by having like a sexting relationship with somebody versus having an actual in-person relationship. You're starting to see that in Japan, where they're actually looking for people to move out there to have babies out there to help stop the decline in the population out there.
But then you look at a place like China, where it's like, no, one child at maximum.
Yeah. And that's, they've done a good job of controlling population because they were really pushing the population issue. And now it's become something where China's more or less known for being so restrictive about having sex and having kids they mastered the art of birth control over there. They've really focused on it. Where here, we're starting to see, politicians and billionaires going out of their ways telling people we need to start having way more kids because they're afraid of like the workforce here diminishing. We're trying to get a lot of people out of this country, I guess. And we're going to fill those roles with more and more people.
Let me just respond to that before we go to break. It seems to me it's counterintuitive because we already have an exploding homeless population. We already have more people who are unemployed than jobs. Big picture for the future will exist. So what would be the argument to have more kids if we can't accommodate more people?
It's because more kids means more workers. More people can be out there working in those jobs that are going to be coming up. The more
because we're aging out in the next 10, 15 years.
Absolutely. And there's going to be people getting paid less and less money to do jobs. I mean, really, we used to get away with having one job. Now all of us have to have several jobs in order to get by.
Yeah.
And you're going to need the workforce if you're going to be eliminating a huge chunk of the population here that's working actively. And so a lot of the people are having less and less sex for a bunch of reasons. Their emotional and sexual needs are being met in other ways. But now there's also political pressure on people to have kids. And that changes the discussion because we were talking about a little bit last week about some of the laws, the legislation that's going through aimed at restricting pleasure and sex and sexual expression. So these are all things that are now on the table, and we'll go into that in the next. We've got 14 states currently that have anti-porn, anti-sex toy legislation on the books.
Dr. Sam Zia, the sex doctor, is in, and he's holding court. He has a lot of great information for all of us. It's Later with Mo Kelly, KFI AM 640, live everywhere on social media and the iHeartRadio app.
You're listening to Later with Mo Kelly on demand from KFI AM 640.
KFI AM 640, the sex doctor is in. Sam Zia continues to join us here in studio. Sam, last segment we were talking about how Gen Z has pulled away from the whole idea of sex as far as participation. It doesn't have the same level of importance or influence over their lives in the way that the previous generations had a control over us, you could say. But also, that's how people are changing, but also laws are changing around the country.
Yeah. Well, the author of the article that you had sent me was talking about how she was also very much like consumed with her own virginity growing up. And it seems like people nowadays, younger people, Gen X or Gen Zers, are much more likely to not take that stuff as seriously. So it's really, the game as far as sex goes has changed. The information around it, the content around it is so easily accessible, and people are actually getting pretty decent information, where before, a lot of times people when they're looking for any information regarding sex or sexuality, they'd usually be asking somebody who has less information in them as far as that goes. So now people are getting reasonably good sexual information online. It's just making sure you have it in the right context. But as far as laws go, and what the problem is that for all the good education you can get online about sex and sexuality, a lot of that stuff is going to be thrown out with the bathwater with a lot of these this legislation going through aimed to restrict access to online porn. And also not just that, restrict access to people getting adult novelty toys, sex toys, like we were talking about last week.
But we know just from history, our personal lives and, life in general, restricting access to pornographic materials has never decreased either the demand or the access, really.
Yeah, but the only thing that it does is it makes it so people now have to go to different sources to ask those questions. And the people giving those answers are going to be ones where, let's say the government is going to be much more approving of what those answers are going to be. So now you're going to have people not looking online or not having as much access, especially in those formative years when you may have a lot of questions, but you're way too embarrassed to ask the people around you, so you go online. Now you're not going to be able to get any answers.
Well, it was different because when I was growing up, we didn't have any online. Our knowledge base was the extension of the friends we hung out with.
Yeah.
So you ask him, hey, what about this or what about that? And hopefully you had a decent source to get information from. Usually you don't, because they're knuckleheads just like you are.
Yeah, if you're lucky. I had an older sibling, and so I got to raid his adult magazine stash because he was like 7 years older than me.
I had an older sister. That wasn't happening.
Yeah, so I got to learn a little bit from that, and also I was lucky enough to have a family that was really on top of that stuff. My mom and dad were totally on top of me getting as much education about sex and sexuality as possible. Most people do not have parents as accepting of sex and sexuality.
True.
So my mom is a psychoanalyst, and her toilet seat reading was a book called The New Sex Therapy. And it had actual pencil sketch drawings in it. So I learned all about that stuff because I learned to read on the toilet.
That didn't weird you out. That didn't unnerve you.
It did, but I also was like, this is interesting. I was at the same time fascinated by it. So I guess that's where a lot of my inclination towards this field kind of got started. But there's a lot of legislation now going around. 14 states, most recently South Dakota, jumped in with laws that aim to restrict access to online porn by making people provide either a picture of their license, some form of ID, some way to verify that they are over 18. The Supreme Court voted 6-3, saying that this is constitutional, went right down party lines. It was the case. The case was Free Speech Coalition versus Paxton in Texas. Since Texas is kind of a bellwether state when it comes to this kind of legislation, you're slowly going to start seeing more and more states adopting legislation similar to
just because Texas took that step forward.
Absolutely. And, full disclosure, I'm a member of the Free Speech Coalition. It's the political action committee that tries to do the best they can to advocate for the rights of adult film performers. But yeah, for all of that, and there's going to be a bunch of other conservative states following suit. And this brings up a question for me, for all the people demanding smaller government. This seems like the opposite, where we're finding ways to have the government start to get directly into our bedroom. I mean, I brought a bag full of sex toys and lubes.
Sam, I hate to interrupt you, but this is, maybe you're not old enough to know the ways of the world, but we were never a country about keeping the government out of our bedroom. Historically, the government has always been in our bedroom.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. But I was hoping that, times have changed and people put more of their money where their mouth is with that kind of thing. But I mean, I came in with a bag of sex toys and lubes and stuff like that last week, that if I had been traveling through and got pulled over in Texas, I would have been put in prison for distributing. Like that, like the same way that you would get busted for drugs, they have the same kind of laws for sex toys. And for me, I have a hard time with trying to legislate people's access to pleasure when it's not harming anybody else.
That has always been the issue with, let's say, prostitution. The government has always been in people's business when it comes to bedroom activity. Always. The laws as far as sodomy going back into the early 20th century. Always been an issue. We can say before Loving versus Virginia, as far as interracial marriages, always been in people's lives in bedroom. The only difference now is we just changed the subject matter or the heading, but it's always been the same. Dr. Sam, I have to run, but it's always great having you in studio. You're going to come back and see us next week, hopefully?
I'll be around. I'm actually going to be maybe running the Chargers game, because that's the first football game of the season, and I'm still an employee of iHeart.
Have they officially made that announcement yet?
I'm not sure. I know that Thursday is the first game.
Yeah, they've told us. I don't know if they told everyone else.
They told us.
Yeah. So I might be here. I might have to run in and do a quick little hi there and hello.
Oh, that's right, because that's next Thursday.
Yeah. But if I'm not going to be too consumed with that, I will definitely be here to give you some more sex advice.
Sam, the sex doctor, we appreciate you.
I appreciate you, brother.
When we come back, we're going to say goodbye to Chuck Mangione and also the Hulk Hogan. KFI AM 640, we're live everywhere on the iHeartRadio app.
You're listening to Later with Mo Kelly on demand from KFI AM 640.
And let me take you back to a time musically in the late 1970s and the early 1980s. When you say the term pop music, it's not one type of music. Pop is short for popular, and that changes with the years and decades. So if you say pop music in the late 1970s and early 80s, you had music which was kind of R&B, kind of jazz, kind of traditional pop, which was prior to that time. And a lot of it was instrumental. You'd have songs like Breezin' by George Benson. You'd have Route 101 or Rise by Herb Alpert. And you had obviously Chuck Mangione, Feel So Good. Those were pop music songs back then. And you may think it odd to have an instrumental, a jazz sounding instrumental being on the Billboard Hot 100 chart or the top 200 chart or R&B and jazz chart all at the same time. But back then it was kind of usual. It was not uncommon at all. And Chuck Mangione had a huge hit with Feel So Good that a lot of people do know. But beyond that, he was a transformative artist because, and this is really going inside nerd baseball, he played the flugelhorn, which is not a trumpet. What you hear is a flugelhorn, which is, it looks similar to a trumpet or a cornet, but it's larger than a trumpet. It has a different, more mellow sound. And it's a warmer sound, and it's much more difficult to play than an actual trumpet, which was my first instrument. And if you see it, and Daniel's showing pictures of it on our YouTube page, it's a larger instrument, and it requires much more skill and command. But Chuck Mangione obviously will be remembered most for Feel So Good, but he helped change music and the perception of what was pop music during that time. He was about as pop as they can be in the sense of he was known anywhere and everywhere. He would do the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, for example, and I'll play that in just a second. But he was very mainstream, and the times that I did meet him when I was working at the Grammys, he's just one of those, I'm glad to say he's one of the people that I have nothing bad to say about because he was always very humble. There was a spirit of humility around him. Yes, he was the Chuck Mangione, but he was not anyone who thought so much of himself that you couldn't have a conversation with him. And I know we're short of time, but I definitely want to play this where he was, and he had a rebirth with King of the Hill where he played himself.
Out there, Stu.
I'm thinking about flipping that steak there.
Alrighty.
No, flip that other one.
Don't go away. We'll be right back with more of Make a Steak.
But Megalo boy, you're shopping for the rest of your life.
How you doing out there? I'm Chuck Mangione. You know, even celebrities have to hunt for bargains. That's why I go to the Megalo Mart, where shopping feels so good.
And that's how some people came to know Chuck Mangione. But I remember him from his peak, and maybe Mark Ronner might remember this clip when he appeared one of the many times on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson.
My next guest, you all know, is a great young musician and composer. And his new album is a live concert with a 70-piece orchestra at the Hollywood Bowl, which is this right here, live at the Hollywood Bowl. He's going to be touring all over the country in July and August, including a week in Los Angeles at the Universal Amphitheater starting July 17th. Would you welcome, please, Chuck Mangione.
Also passing away today, Hulk Hogan, Terry Bollea, at the age of 71. And he's someone who, regardless of his personal antics that I didn't approve of, or some people may not approve of his public political stances, he was a transformative figure when it came to professional wrestling. I personally believe that he single-handedly saved much of the industry, including what was then the WWF. It was his appearance in Rocky III, which I think changed the overall perception of what a wrestling star could and should be. And if you're too young to remember Thunder Lips, I feel sorry for you.
Thunder Lips is here. In the flesh, baby.
Baby.
Oh, my God.
The ultimate male versus the ultimate meatball.
He is a monster. How much would you take even to get in the ring with him?
Would you like to start at Fort Knox?
In the white corner, an incredible sight, standing nearly 7 feet, weighing 390 pounds,
Oh, geez.
Undisputed wrestling champion of the world.
The biggest arm in the world.
A man who calls himself the ultimate object of desire, the mountain of molten lust, the one, the only, Thunderlips.
And then all of a sudden, everyone knew who Hulk Hogan was. And the rest, they say, is history. Rest in peace, Hulk Hogan. Rest in peace, Chuck Mangione. I'll have my final thought when we come back, and we'll also check in with George Norrie.
You're listening to Later with Mo Kelly on demand from KFI AM 640.
KFI AM 640. It's Later with Mo Kelly. Coming up in just moments will be Coast to Coast AM with our friend George Norrie. And he joins me now with a preview. How are you, sir?
I am your friend, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing well, and thank you for recommending Von Brashler to come on the show because he was really good. He really
did it work out for you?
Yes, it did. Yes, it did.
Did he interpret your dreams?
To a certain degree, he basically says I have a lot of stuff on my mind. I have some issues to work out, and I need to go figure out what's wrong with me.
Well, really?
That's the long story short.
You're one of the good guys. Well, anyways, we got a great show tonight. We're going to talk about who controls the world and later on the mystery of time on Coast to Coast.
Sounds good. I'll be joining you.
See you soon.
And before I get out of here, just want to let you know, tomorrow I'll be doing some stuff outside of here. So we will have some of the best moments of Later with Mo Kelly tomorrow. Don't want that to catch you off guard, but do plan to listen in, tune in, because there's a lot of good stuff that Stefan has set aside for moments just like these. That is tomorrow. And I want to close out with this final thought. And it connects to what I was discussing with Mark earlier in the show. And I often talk about how, at least in my view, America, which I love dearly, but I can also be honest about it, is presently an unserious country. Unserious because we are unable to pass meaningful legislation. Unserious because the biggest news stories usually have to do with what new congressional or DOJ investigation has been started or documents have been released or something, more than 8 years old to accomplish a whole lot of nothing. For example, Attorney General Pam Bondi announced on Monday that the DOJ has released documents related to the FBI's investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server, as if it were 2015. And some openly mused, I'm being serious, that maybe the investigation should be reopened. That was Monday. And just in case you weren't sure whether there was enough Hillary Clinton in your news diet, this is what happened yesterday. The House Oversight Panel voted to subpoena both Bill and Hillary Clinton over possible links to Ghislaine Maxwell. And just in case you didn't also know, the House Oversight Committee is to ensure the efficiency, effectiveness, and accountability of the federal government and all of its agencies and serve as a check to the president and his actions. President as in sitting president, not the one from 24 years ago. As in sitting president who also has direct ties to Jeffrey Epstein. Let me say it again. We are an unserious nation. We want the truth about Jeffrey Epstein, right? Right? But we just don't want to address the elephant in the middle of the room or the truth staring us in the face. You can subpoena both Bill and Donald, right? But I wasn't kidding. More Hillary, please. Because that'll get to the bottom of Jeffrey Epstein and improve the economy. Or not. But I wasn't kidding. On Wednesday, DNI Tulsi Gabbard offered this headline. Quote, Russia sat on documents which detailed heavy tranquilizer use by Hillary Clinton. Close quote. And I really don't understand this because is the contention that Russia was not actually trying to intervene in the 2016 election because Russia sat on information that was embarrassing or damaging to Hillary Clinton? Or is it just another way of mentioning the phrase Hillary Clinton in 2025 because politics is like music radio? The rule is to play the hits. We are an unserious nation. And all of this is simultaneous to sending Congress home early to avoid having a vote on releasing Jeffrey Epstein files. Because, again, we are an unserious nation with no serious designs on releasing anything meaningful regarding Jeffrey Epstein. Oh, yeah, I know. We released the MLK files because everyone was asking for that. But then again, I told you about those files, those Jeffrey Epstein files. They will never see the light of day. Just semi-chasing new and old conspiracies to nowhere in particular. In that new conspiracy that former President Obama somehow was the architect of a coup to get people to stop talking about Jeffrey Epstein. Know that that is another conspiracy bridge to nowhere. Barack Obama is not getting subpoenaed. He's not getting indicted. He's not getting arrested or imprisoned. How do I know? Because Senator Ted Cruz said so.
That's a hard call.
Look, there would be an argument about it. I'll tell you.
He's not going to be prosecuted for treason. But that's not going to happen.
He's not going to be prosecuted in all likelihood for treason. But where the criminal liability will start is with members of the Obama administration who went under oath before Congress and lied. Flat out lied. We know Jim Clapper has lied repeatedly, and that will be the beginning of the investigation.
Okay, so we have another new investigation there. But that's the party in power. That's what they're doing with their power. But Democrats don't think you're going to get off easy. You didn't care about the content of the Epstein files ever. Not now, not then. Maybe a member here or there in Congress like Jamie Raskin. But by and large, y'all Democrats had absolutely zero to say about Jeffrey Epstein. You could have pursued Donald Trump in regard to Epstein during the Biden administration, whether the case was sealed or not. And I know it was sealed until 2024. I mean, you pursued Trump in New York regarding the Stormy Daniels payments. That is the same state as Jeffrey Epstein. You pursued Donald Trump with the classified documents in Florida and D.C. I mean, Jeffrey Epstein did live in Florida, so there's some connection there. I mean, it wasn't like it would have been beneath you Democrats, because something tells me you just are as afraid of the Epstein files as the Republicans. Something as in more than just Bill Clinton. It may not be just Bill Clinton. It could be Bill Clinton and a few other Democrats, but clearly you're afraid of something. But that goes back to what I said. Those files are never, ever coming out. Ghislaine Maxwell, speaking of Jeffrey Epstein, is getting ready to trade a pardon for keeping Trump out of her mouth. Yes, I said it. I meant it. So that's another nail in that coffin. And some Democrats are calling for an investigation like Mark Rodder into the cancellation of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert.
You leave me out of this.
A congressional investigation. You know how stupid that is? That's almost as stupid and unserious as calling for two sports franchises to change their names back to racial slurs and racially insulting iconography. So no, Dems, you don't get to claim the moral high ground on Epstein. We had the White House releasing an official statement today, getting into a Twitter fight with a freaking cartoon on Comedy Central. That was just earlier today. But altogether, all that happened just this week. We are an unserious country with an unserious, dysfunctional government. This is what happens when you destroy the lines between reality TV and governance. But we chose this, we elected this, and we continue to ask for more and wonder why nothing ever gets done. For KFI AM 640, I'm Mo Kelly.
KFI and KOST HD2, Los Angeles, Orange County. More stimulating talk.
Football is back.
Let's go, baby!
On July 26th and 27th, teams across the league take the field for Back Together Weekend, presented by YouTube TV.
Let's do this for the fans!
With 2 full days of practices, player interviews, and behind-the-scenes access, it's a can't-miss NFL reunion. Whoa! Back Together Weekend, presented by YouTube TV, July 26th and 27th. Go to NFL.com/BackTogetherWeekend for more information.